Greetings, Dr. Joseph Martin. Answers to Human Alienation, the Way Forward. This is part 2 of 2 videos, and you'll want to look at the one on Erich Fromm that I just did now. It's very clear to see and say and know that every one of us on the planet feels alienated. In many ways, in many levels, in many dimensions, we're alienated. Inside and outside, in just about every way you can imagine. For truly, this illusion of the third dimension is a prison of the soul. We're going to look at, in the last few centuries, there have been a number of remarkable women and men who focused as social psychologists, philosophers, mystics, psychiatrists, psychoanalysts, democratic socialists, and so on, who have come up with the understanding of outlining what it is we're alienated from. So let me go through this and we'll go through it carefully, and then we'll make some suggestions for the solutions to our alienation that we all feel and experience. We're going to start back in the time of the first wave of what we call industrialization, and I will make reference to now moving into the third wave of knowledge and love and empowerment. But the first wave, which happened about 200, 250 years ago, of industrialization with the steam engine with Watt in Scotland and the United Kingdom, started a whole series of challenges with child labor, women labor, being unpaid labor, and so on, and lots of illness and accidents in the satanic mills, if you like, that many of the romantics were writing about. And William Blake, the great painter, author, poet, writer, activist, was one of the very first to identify what we're being alienated from. And you'll want to read any and all of his books and look at his paintings and his metal plate engraved works that he's done to understand the very amazing imagery that he came up to show that we're all alienated. And here's the basis of the alienation. Your life and your work are meaningless if you're giving it away to other people. Your life and your work are meaningless if you're giving it away to other people. Now, after William Blake and the Romanticists, Karl Marx came along in the 1800s, and he wrote some really deep, powerful social political philosophy, actually based on some of Jesus's comments in the first parts of the New Testament, in which he claimed that all human beings in class societies and caste societies are alienated from these things. They're alienated from their labor because you are giving your labor away to an owner of a factory or an industry or a business, and he owns your labor and you get paid for it, although he makes a profit from your labor. So you're alienated from your labor, you're alienated from your time because you have to give people at least 40 hours of your time every week or more. And you're alienated from the profits because this person or persons, corporations are making profits from your labor and you are receiving less than minimum wage. And you're alienated from your health because most labor is given away and there are no health benefits in most countries of the world. And that's why people like to hire individuals on contract or part-time, because then the owners of business don't have to pay you for your medical and dental. So you suffer from your health. But most of all, you suffer psychologically and you suffer spiritually. You're alienated from your sense of your own freedom. You're giving your labor away. And you're alienated from your own sense of depression, that you aren't creating your own life, you're giving it away to somebody else. So it's a great psychological depression. And you're alienated spiritually because you're not your own person and you're not living the soul. You're giving your soul away, or you're keeping it frozen on ice. Now, after Karl Marx, there was Sigmund Freud, who wrote a lot about that, the notion of alienation, in which he said to live in society with its many discontents for the people, you give away your instinctual nature, your own beingness, your own animal nature, if you like. And it's not just sex, but the sexual instinct, but it's the power instinct. You give that away in order to conform and fit into society. And how does society do this? It's through what Freud calls the superego. It's some collective consciousness that institutions, governments, military, and society at large force you to be conforming to the values and beliefs in order to fit in, and at what a cost. Then we have Dr. Carl Jung, of course, and his many books, including his most uh, advanced and most recent and public books before he passed in 1961, were a warning that dire predictions for individuals because the state was controlling our psyche, our mentality, our emotions, in fact, and there was going to be such a confrontation and a series of psychological depressions and illnesses based on the overweening state societies and how they control and make us conform. And the answers for Carl Jung are very clear. One needs to go into the shadow, become conscious of the unconscious, deal with your emotional complexes, find freedom and empowerment in that, open up to your feelings and emotions, open up to your intuition, open up to being in your body and your sensations, and not just being in your mind, and opening up to what he calls the self. The self is a psychological reality. It also happens to be a mirror of a spiritual reality of the self, or what we call the nirvana, or the Atman, the Christ, the Buddha, consciousness. All of these things are interwoven and intertwined with what Jung called about the need for individuation as the answer to the anima, of the blindness and the depression and the depression, the serious depression that everyone on the planet has at this time. After Carl Jung, we had Viktor Frankl, and you'll see a video on him as well as I've done one on Dr. Carl Jung. And Frankl, who'd been through the Holocaust in the German Nazi concentration camps, suggested that the alienation was again from every part of ourselves. Our bodies, our food, our homes, our parents, our relatives, our loved ones, our clothes, our health, our time. Everything was taken away in those concentration camps. And in a way, it's a symbolic mirror of society, just on a more obstreperous level of concentration and compulsion and totalitarianism. The answer for Frankl to alienation was love, meaning, and purpose, and living in every moment. And you'll want to look at his books on logotherapy. Now, before I get back to Erich Fromm, which is also what I want to share about in terms of his views on alienation, let me just share a little bit about Noam Chomsky, who is this perhaps one of the greatest thinkers that of any century, of any time. He's a polymath of extraordinarily mountainous dimensions, and I've had the great pleasure to listen to him twice in person when I was studying at the University of Toronto. Noam Chomsky has this to say about the notion of freedom and what he calls social engineering. Now, after the Great and the Second Great World War that ended in 1945, there was a sense that there needed to be a change. So many millions of Allied troops had been killed in the war. And so what happened was when these troops came back to the Western democratic nations, meaning Canada and America and Britain and other nations as well, there was a sense of we're not going to do this anymore the way we did before. We need to stop the alienation and the murder that happened during the war and have some solidarity. So they start to feel that this there were no jobs for the vets when they came back, and this was one of the great motivators and impulses for this movement that I'm telling you about now, which was that there was no jobs, there was no health benefits, and it wasn't the depression anymore from the 1930s, the social depression, economic depression. So what these people did is they banded together in unions, and they demanded that they have rights and were able to formulate some businesses for themselves against the corporations and the banks. Luckily for the American people, Franklin Delano Roosevelt was able to understand the people and deeply understand the people, and he was able to set up make work projects for many of the veterans and other people who at that time had no jobs and had no money to put food on the table. And so, in this means where there was a kind of a democratic motion for freedom, Noam Chomsky suggests that some devious social engineering happened that was set up by several of the American automobile corporations. And I won't mention them, but you can look into this yourself. And they planned the social engineering of suburbanization. Their first model project was in Los Angeles in the early 1950s, in which they decided that we would sell more cars and we would invest more money in fossil fuels like oil and gas and make more money and profits if we could tell the people to give up their notion of living in the inner city where there was a nice sense of community and care and sharing, and people didn't need cars, they could walk or bike anywhere. But they forced people through coercion and marketing, which is a negative kind of character trait of people who need to take power over other people. Advertising and marketing and actually being inside with the people who were governing Los Angeles. And they created suburbs. They forced people to move to the suburbs, and they took over the inner city for their banks and corporations. So if you lived in the suburbs, you had no way of going anywhere unless you had a car, and then you had to pay for the gas. So the oil companies and the car companies were making a lot of money through this surreptitious, shady, hidden notion of creating some kind of social engineering that everyone hereafter had to live in suburbia. Now, anywhere in the world, most people live in suburbia. They've lost their inner city roots and their communities and families there, and they're forced to buy homes, buy property, have mortgages, pay their debts, buy one or two cars if there's two people working in town, and pay for all the gas and oil. Now, this happened simultaneously all over North America in about 1952 to 1916. By then, every city and town in Canada and America was suburbanized. I being one. I was in the first model suburban community in Don Mills, Ontario in 1954. Now, not only did it destroy the ecology and environment by tearing up trees and forests and lakes and rivers and ponds and destroying the animal habitats all over the world. Now there are very few natural, ecologically safe and sound habitats that are self-sustaining anywhere in the world, even in the northern climes of Canada and other mountainous areas as well. All for the fact of this social engineering done by actually the government was a part of this in America and also in Canada, and also the transportation companies. Now, instead of starting more railways, which would have helped people to take transport, safe, easy transport that wouldn't cost too much into town if they wanted to work, they under the guise of military, they built all these highways of transportation, thereby allowing or forcing, in a way, people to be able or need to take highways with cars to their places of work. Instead of, and we still have these issues today, what the cities need is more just easy transportation and fewer cars. Well, this is all part of the whole process of what we're talking about alienation. Now we're alienated from nature more, we're alienated from the places where we may have been born, we're alienated by living in suburbs, which are clones of every other suburb in the world, and going to coffee shops and so on, which are all clones of other places in the world. And we're conforming to this. The white picket fence and so on. And there's a lot of alienation. In fact, the greatest oppression for people is people living in the suburbs. Back to Erich Fromm. What does he have to say about all this? In one of his earliest books, which is called Escape from Freedom, or when it was published in the United Kingdom, it's called Escape from Fear, he talks about two kinds of fear, freedom from and freedom to. Freedom from is negative freedom. Freedom to is positive freedom. Freedom from or negative freedom is the freedom, that so-called freedom that we're told when we're made to conform to society, its culture, its worldview, its ethos, its beliefs, and its institutions, and we are forced to be part of it. Whether or not these are repressive or whether or not they're good for us, that negative freedom is saying, we'll look after you. Don't try to be thinking for yourself or independent. Just conform to us, and we'll be the big mother or the big father, and we'll look after you. This negative freedom actually is very unsatisfying to the soul. It's psychologically damaging to the individual and their sense of purpose and meaning and self-worth in life. And it's damaging in overall because as a social setting or social reality, if you like, what happens is the people will eventually rebel because they're feeling all of this alienation and lack of freedom, and there always will be a rebellion in some form or other. People will only be repressed for so long. As Carl Jung is fond of saying, people will not forever accept their nullification. Now, freedom too is a different kind of freedom. It's standing up for yourself, first of all, being a critical thinker, thinking for yourself, being independently minded, using your own sense of your own uniqueness and your own value, your own self-worth, and also learning to be a loving individual in your own terms. And the freedom too is the positive part of what the struggle, the paradoxical struggle we all go through as individuals in order to become true human beings, as we say in Mohawk, unkwehuwe, meaning an open-hearted, true, authentic human being. Now, in all this struggle to be free that we're all experiencing, there are three different kinds of avenues available to individuals and to groups in society. The first one, Erich Fromm calls authoritarianism. And authoritarianism is the need, and he outlines this as a sadomastic kind of thing, the character structure of people who are authoritarian or dictators or totalitarian leaders, a sadomasochistic need to control and subdue other people in any way that they can, whether through marketing and advertising, which is kind of seemingly banal but very unconsciously seeps into your whole sense of yourself, or whether through power and control, whether through banking and money, through corporations, whether through culture or through military means. This authoritarianism is a way of social psychology relating to almost every nation in the world. The second type is destructiveness. Now, rather than being sadomasochistic, this is just destruction for the sake of destruction, in the sense of you want to control others that you seemingly can't control, and you've tried, and you're not empowered, you're not capable of dominating or controlling others. And so your only option in this model of being, this characterization, is destructiveness. And we can see, if we chart over the last 50, 60 years, an increasing numbers of individuals who are suicide bombers and people who shoot high school students in their own schools, and destructive groups around the world, not just the Muslims of the Taliban and Al-Qaeda and also now ISIS, but they are bent on destroying and killing and murdering everyone because it's seemingly for them, in their own thinking, is the only option they have to fight back the authoritarianism that they seem to experience. And the third one would be complacency or conformity. In this conformity, people just blindly have faith or give away their own rights or responsibilities to those people in power. And in that sense, they have no true knowledge of themselves. They give up their ability for critical thinking, and they are alienated by conforming in the way that it releases them from all sense of self-empowerment. Well, having said all of this, what are the answers that we can find to this human condition of alienation that seemingly has gone on for time immemorial in human societies? We've looked at social psychological solutions, and there are some. However, I'd like to point out the fact that when people realize that there is an authoritarian kind of dictatorial power that's controlling them, and they want to create, as they have historically, revolutions, whether it's in America, France, Russia, China, India, many other countries of the world, what happens typically is one authoritarian regime is then followed by another authoritarian regime with the similar kinds of maybe different ideologies or values in a sense, but with the same outcome of destructiveness and sadomasochistic control of the people that they just overcome. This is an endless cycle of dictatorial kind of regimes coming and going that we can chart historically on paper and in our minds. So what are the solutions? What are the answers to human alienation? Well, having looked at all the psychological theories around this and explored all the mystical and spiritual avenues that are known to humanity historically and cross-culturally, I would say this, and this is something you want to study and learn and know on your own terms, that there is an answer, that deep in the heart we are divine human beings, and we all know that we are a soul, and we have a mind and a body and an ego, but we are typically and we knowingly are a soul. That's our divinity. And we have to deal with all the paradoxes of good and evil, freedom and subjugation, and enlightenment and lethargy. And we need to come clear, become conscious, become activated with the love in our heart and the knowledge and intuition that we are who we are, we can make a difference. And it's important that we just stand up and start doing this by doing our inner work. It's always an inwardness that is the solution. It's never an outwardness. The outwardness will always lead to either banality, anger, aggression, fear, or destruction, and death. And always the inwardness will bring the peace, the love, the contentment, the joy, the enlightenment, the knowledge and the understanding, and the vision of how we can do this together as a human community. And it is possible. We know that it's possible. This is not utopian. This is doable. Through the cycles of time and change, we can create a better society for us all. And that's the whole path and process that we're on at this point. And how is this best done? You perhaps have looked at my videos on Advaita Vedanta, which is a philosophy. It's not a religion. And it helps to show and explain and teach and train you in becoming the unity, the oneness, the holism, the transcendence and the immanence and the now of yourself in this world, in this life now. And Erich Fromm would say, that means to live life fully and spontaneously now, and don't have any other situations around you to repress or hold you in, but just to live the full joy and the full love of yourself now. That's one way to experience your freedom, to experience your love, experience your knowledge, and your connection with all that is, all our relations, everyone else's sisters and brothers, and Erich Fromm is very clear that we can all create that as well, as we know all the spiritual teachers have. Well, this has been quite a journey again. I hope you're finding a lot of benefit from these, and again, feel free to share these and like this video with all your friends so that we can all come together with our deep inward process and finding the love and being the heart love that we are, and knowing that we can create something better for ourselves in a way that's a peaceful, non-violent way through simply encouraging each other with our journey and co-creating something better for all our relations for many, many generations to come. All my love and blessings with you, for you, through you. Dr. Joseph Martin, Om Namah Shivaya.